My name is Sister Rebecca, and what I'm about to share might completely change the way you see the serpent in the book of Genesis. I have been a Carmelite nun for 40 years. I've spent my life in quiet prayer, deep reflection, and careful study of the scriptures. But on September 23, 2023, something happened that changed my life forever. I died for 23 minutes and 19 seconds. During that time, Jesus Christ himself revealed a shocking truth to me about the serpent in the Garden of Eden. This truth is so deep and powerful that it changes the way we understand humanity's fall and Christ's victory on the cross. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd also love to hear your thoughts and reflections about this experience. If this testimony speaks to your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can continue walking with us in deeper conversations like this. Let's keep this space respectful and open, so we can learn and grow together. I hope you enjoy listening. I remember the moment everything happened so clearly. I was outside trimming the roses when I suddenly felt a strong, crushing pain in my chest. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before. The pain was so intense, it felt like my soul was being squeezed out of my body. I tried to call out to Sister Agnes, who was working nearby, but no sound came out. The world started spinning, and the last thing I remember was the soft, sweet smell of roses as I fell down among the flowers I had been caring for. What happened next was beyond anything I had experienced in all my years of religious life. In an instant, the physical pain was completely gone. I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a realm of pure light. It wasn't the usual tunnel of light that people often describe in near-death experiences. Instead, it felt like I was traveling through the very structure of creation itself. I saw colors I had never seen before. I heard sounds that felt like heavenly music. And I felt a love so deep and powerful that it filled every part of me. Then I saw him. Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, stood before me. He shone with a brightness so strong it would have blinded human eyes. He looked both physical and spiritual at the same time, far beyond anything human words can fully explain. His eyes held the depth of eternity. His presence was filled with such pure and overwhelming love that I immediately fell to my knees in worship. Then he spoke. "Rise, Maria. I have brought you here for a purpose," he continued. "Today, I will show you truths about the Garden of Eden that have been misunderstood for thousands of years." As I stood up, everything around us began to change. Suddenly, we were standing in the Garden of Eden. I knew right away where we were, but it was nothing like I had imagined from my studies. This Eden felt more real than anything I had ever known on Earth. The colors were richer. The harmony was perfect. Even the air felt alive with God's presence. But what took my breath away was what Jesus showed me next. "Watch carefully," he said, pointing to a being that appeared in the garden. "This is who your scriptures call the serpent. But this is not the simple snake many people imagine." What I saw left me completely speechless. The being before us was unbelievably beautiful. He shone with light and was covered with precious stones that reflected God's glory. This was no ordinary angel. This was a being of the highest order in heaven. This, Jesus explained, is who the Hebrew scriptures call the Nachash. In English, that word is often translated simply as serpent. But its real meaning is much deeper. "Look closely, Maria," he said, because very few have been allowed to see this. As I watched in awe, Jesus revealed the true nature of this being. He was one of the highest members of heaven's court, a guardian cherub who once stood in God's presence. Suddenly, I understood why Eve was not afraid of him in the garden. This was not a snake crawling through the grass. This was a radiant, powerful being filled with wisdom and light. With a shaking voice, I asked, "Lord, why has this truth been hidden for so long?" Jesus answered gently, "It has not been hidden, Maria. It has been veiled." He explained that the human mind often turns deep spiritual truths into simple physical symbols. Over time, the serpent became just a symbol of deception, and the deeper truth was forgotten. This being was Lucifer, the morning star, the anointed cherub who once stood near my Father's throne. As he spoke, the scene changed again. I saw Lucifer standing before God's throne, clothed in glory and leading worship in heaven. But slowly, I watched pride begin to grow inside him. It started to corrupt his glory from within. Watch carefully, Jesus said, because this is where evil truly began. I saw how this being slowly changed from light into darkness. It didn't happen suddenly. It was a gradual fall. It began with pride and ended in rebellion. I saw him start to desire worship for himself. He believed his beauty and wisdom made him worthy of praise. This is why understanding the true nature of the serpent matters, Jesus explained. Humanity's fall did not begin with a simple snake. It began with one of heaven's highest beings, one who knew God's glory firsthand. The scene changed again, and I saw this fallen being enter the Garden of Eden. But he did not appear as a snake. He appeared as a being of light, beauty, and wisdom. At that moment, I fully understood why Eve spoke with him without fear. He looked like a divine messenger, someone who belonged in the garden and carried heavenly knowledge. The deception was subtle, Jesus said. He did not come as darkness, but as light. That is why the Apostle Paul later wrote that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Those words were not just symbolic poetry. They described his true nature and his method of deception. As we stood there, Jesus began to reveal even deeper truths about what really happened in Eden. The vision shifted to the moment of temptation. But now I saw it with new understanding. I could see spiritual realities I had never noticed before. What you are seeing, Jesus said, is more than a conversation between a woman and a serpent. This was a cosmic rebellion unfolding in the physical world. I watched as the fallen cherub approached Eve carefully and intentionally. Even in his fallen state, he was still beautiful. He still radiated wisdom and authority. Now I clearly understood why Eve did not question his presence. He looked like he belonged here, Jesus continued. Notice how he speaks. He did not begin with a lie. He began with a question. Did God really say? This was not innocent curiosity. It was the very first seed of doubt planted in the human heart. As the vision continued, Jesus explained the deeper meaning of the word Nachash. He said that in human language, words usually carry one meaning. But in divine truth, words have layers. Nachash describes three things at the same time: a serpent, a shining one, and a deceiver. And in that moment, all three were present. The vision grew wider, and I saw how this being once stood in God's presence, covered with precious stones, perfect in beauty and wisdom. Jesus clearly explained the words written in Ezekiel. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone covered you. These were not poetic or symbolic words, Jesus said. They described his real appearance. The stones reflected God's glory in ways the human mind can hardly imagine. Then Jesus showed me a moment that made my soul shake. I saw Lucifer fall. I watched him change from the morning star into the adversary, from God's anointed cherub into the great deceiver. It was like watching light slowly turn into darkness. Watch carefully, Jesus said, because this explains why Eden needed such a powerful solution: my incarnation and my sacrifice. This was not only about disobedience or eating forbidden fruit. It was about a rebellion that damaged creation itself. I saw pride take over Lucifer's heart. Then the vision shifted again, and I saw the 5 statements written by Isaiah. I will go up into heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will rise above the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Each statement directly challenged God's authority. This was not simple pride. It was a deliberate attempt to take God's place. When he came to Eve, Jesus explained, he offered her the same temptation. You will be like God. Then Jesus showed me how this first deception became the pattern for all temptation that followed. The serpent's strategy has never changed, he said. He does not appear as evil, but as light. He does not begin with lies, but with questions that we can trust in God's truth. This is why understanding the serpent's true nature is so important for understanding temptation itself. Then Jesus showed me something that brought me completely to my knees. He revealed the deep, cosmic meaning of his victory on the cross. Suddenly, the scene changed, and I found myself at Calvary. But this time, I was not seeing it only as a physical event. I was seeing it from a spiritual view far beyond human sight. I realized his death was not just a painful execution. It was a cosmic victory over the very being who began the rebellion in Eden. When I said, "It is finished," Jesus explained, I was not only speaking about my physical suffering. I was declaring victory over the Nachash itself. In that moment on the cross, the prophecy spoken in Eden, that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head, was finally fulfilled. I watched in total awe as the spiritual reality of Christ's victory unfolded before me. The cross became a moment of complete cosmic triumph. The deception that began in the Garden of Eden was finally and fully destroyed. I saw clearly that Jesus' death and resurrection did more than forgive human sin. They defeated the very being who introduced sin into creation. This is why Paul later wrote that Christ disarmed the powers and authorities, exposed them publicly, and triumphed over them by the cross, Jesus explained. The cross was not only about saving humanity. It was about restoring the entire cosmos. It was about defeating the being who corrupted creation from the beginning. Then the vision changed again, and Jesus showed me how this truth affects spiritual warfare today. When my followers fight spiritual battles, Jesus said, they are not just dealing with human thoughts or natural weakness. They are facing the same being who deceived Eve, a fallen cherub who still has great intelligence and power, even though he has already been defeated. I began to understand how this truth completely changes how we see temptation and spiritual conflict. The serpent was never just a talking snake. He was a fallen divine being who once stood in God's presence. Even now, though defeated, he still has intelligence and influence. This is why human willpower alone is not enough, Jesus explained. The enemy you face is far beyond human strength. This is why divine intervention was necessary. This is why I had to become human, to defeat the enemy on your behalf. Then Jesus showed me something that made everything finally come together. He revealed how all of Scripture tells one single story. A story of cosmic conflict and divine victory. From Genesis to Revelation, I saw how the battle that began in Eden continues through history, always moving toward Christ's final victory. The serpent in Eden was not just a snake, Jesus said again. He was a fallen divine being who still has power and intelligence, even though he is ultimately defeated. Understanding this truth helps us see how serious humanity's fall really was, and how great Christ's victory truly is. The revelations continued as Jesus showed me even deeper truths about the cosmic battle that began in Eden. The scene shifted once more, and I saw how the serpent's deception affected not only humanity, but all of creation. What happened in Eden, Jesus explained, sent shockwaves through the entire created world. When Adam and Eve believed the deception of the Nachash, they did more than break a rule. They transferred their loyalty from divine authority to a fallen cherub who rebelled against heaven's throne. I watched in amazement as Jesus showed me the massive consequences of this transfer of authority. Creation's perfect harmony was broken, not simply because fruit was eaten, but because humanity aligned itself with a rebellious divine being who wanted to corrupt everything God had made. This is why Paul wrote that all creation groans, Jesus said. The effects of this rebellion went far beyond human souls. It damaged the structure of the physical universe itself. This is why my death and resurrection were not only about saving souls, Jesus explained. They were about restoring all of creation. Then Jesus revealed something that opened my spiritual eyes even wider. He showed me that the prophecy in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, about the seed of the woman crushing the serpent's head, was not just poetic language. It was a declaration of war against the rebellious cherub who corrupted creation. When I became human, Jesus said, I was not only taking on flesh to teach or to die. I entered the physical world to confront and defeat the one who started the rebellion. The cross was not just about forgiveness. It was about cosmic victory. I watched in awe as Jesus revealed the full meaning of his incarnation and death. From heaven's perspective, his victory on the cross accomplished far more than human salvation. It was the complete defeat of the Nachash, fulfilling the promise given in Eden. Look closely, Jesus said, at what happened spiritually when I declared, it is finished. In that moment, I saw the full cosmic impact of his death. His sacrifice did not only forgive sin. It shattered the authority the Nachash had gained through deception. The cross became the ultimate moment of triumph. The corruption that began in the garden was finally destroyed. This is why understanding the serpent's true nature is so important, Jesus said. When people believe it was only a snake, they miss how serious the problem was. And how great the solution had to be. The being who deceived humanity was one of heaven's highest creatures, one who once stood in God's presence and led heavenly worship. Human effort alone could never defeat such an enemy. Only God himself could. Then Jesus showed me something that brought tears to my spiritual eyes. I saw how his victory on the cross affected all of creation. Waves of restoration flowed out from Calvary, touching everything damaged by the Nachash's rebellion. The cross, Jesus explained, was not just about individual salvation. It was about restoring the entire cosmos. When Jesus died and rose again, he began restoring everything that was broken in Eden. The vision continued as Jesus showed me how this truth should change how believers live and fight spiritual battles today. My followers must understand, he said, they are not just fighting human weakness or simple temptation. They are facing a fallen divine being who still has intelligence and power, even though he has already been defeated. This understanding changes everything. The enemy is not a symbol or a myth. He is a fallen cherub who once led worship in heaven and still has influence, even after his defeat at the cross. This is why I want you to share what you have seen, Jesus told me. People must understand how great the problem was, and how complete my victory truly is. When people realize the serpent in Eden was a divine being who rebelled against heaven, they understand why human effort was never enough and why Jesus had to come in the flesh to win this battle. As my time in heaven came to an end, Jesus gave me one final revelation. The story of Eden, he said, is not just about a snake and forbidden fruit. It is about a cosmic rebellion that required a cosmic solution. My death and resurrection provided that solution. I defeated not only sin and death, but the very being who brought them into your world. I felt myself being pulled back into my body. But before I returned, Jesus spoke one last time. Tell them what you have seen, Maria. Help them understand that the battle was never against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. Let them know my victory on the cross was complete. I defeated not only human sin, but the being who introduced sin into creation. Suddenly, I was back in my body, gasping for air as doctors rushed around me. Later, they told me I had been clinically dead for 23 minutes and 17 seconds. They could not explain how I survived without brain damage after so long without oxygen. Since that day, I have shared what Jesus revealed to me about the true nature of the serpent in Eden. He was not just a snake. He was a fallen divine being who once stood in God's presence. This truth changes how we understand temptation, salvation, and Christ's victory on the cross. Jesus had to become human because the enemy was not ordinary. He was one of heaven's highest beings. The cross was not just about forgiveness. It was a cosmic victory over the one who brought sin into the world. This testimony is not about me. It is about the message Jesus wants his church to understand in these times. This is not just theology. It is truth that changes lives. When we understand how powerful the enemy truly was, we see why Christ's sacrifice had to be so great. The cross was not only about forgiving us. It was about defeating the serpent and restoring what was lost in Eden. Christ's victory over sin and death becomes even more powerful when we understand this cosmic battle. Jesus wanted me to share this so we could all understand the depth of his love and the greatness of his victory. I pray this helps you see why we could never solve this problem on our own, and why Jesus had to come and fight this battle for us. This is not only about the past. It is about the spiritual battle we face today. And through Christ's victory, we have been given the ultimate hope.